Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, others who are following elsewhere. Today, we had our first meeting of the new shadow cabinet. As you know, approximately a week ago, we had announced a reconfigured shadow cabinet, and today was the first meeting. At that meeting, we presented a document with the protocols and procedures that we have developed to ensure a streamlined approach to how the shadow cabinet conducts itself, and which outlines the expectations that we have of the members of the shadow cabinet. We are in a process of further policy development and refinement, and we expect our shadow spokesperson on issues of policy and in responding to important matters arising, affecting the nation from day to day. We also determined that we would require the new members of the shadow cabinet to sign the leadership code of conduct. And for those who are in the shadow cabinet and are not actually parliamentarians, we will be making slight adjustments so that they can also sign it, adhering to the 7 covenants which have been identified by the Integrity Commission. We support fully the role and functions of the Integrity Commission in trying to reduce the problem of corruption in our country, which continues to be a very serious and major issue undermining Jamaica's development and society as a whole. And we will always lend our voices in support of having a robust anti-corruption agency that is fully empowered to do its work and to ensure that public resources are used for not for those who might want to divert those resources to friends and cronies. Today, you will be hearing from some of our shadow ministers. We will hear first from Julian Robinson, who speaks on finance and the public service. We will then hear from Leighton Campbell on the government operations. Fitzgerald will speak on port, to which we will hear from Peter Bunting, who is the shadow spokesperson for product. I thank you for listening and look forward to an engaging press conference. Thank you.
Party leader, I want to respond to some assertions that have been made by the Prime Minister yesterday about the state of the economy that the JLP government inherited in this state. An economy that falls leading. In 2013, 2014, and 2015, the 3 preceding years up to 2016, the Jamaican economy enjoyed positive economic growth. But what is most egregious about the Prime Minister's attempt at revisionist history is that he has neglected to tell the public what we inherited in 2011 when he was Prime Minister for a short period of time, but more importantly, a senior cabinet minister in the JLP administration of 2007 to 11. When we came in 2012, program, the government had basically abandoned the IMF agreement. The leadership of the Prime Minister and Peter Phillips, Finance Minister, had changed and our other multilateral partners get more to fiscal reforms that has laid the foundation of the economy that currently exists. Legislation is started to work on the things knowledge does include and passing. So the Prime Minister is going on this frolic of misleading the Jamaican people about what he inherited. What he needs to ensure is an economy that works for all Jamaicans and not just a few. That we have a Jamaican economy that allows Jamaicans to grow and flourish, that people don't have to live hand to mouth. That is what his focus should be on, building equity, That is what we are committed to as an administration. Thank you.
As persons are aware, we had the last local government election in 2016 on November 28th, and we were due to have the local government election by November 28th, 2020, with a 3-month window during which it could be called. We've had 3 postponements of said election. During this time, to vie have in place of the 20 candidates that are required. We unfortunately lost Comrade Maxine Salabi of the Friendship Division, and we use every occasion to note her sterling contribution to the People's National Party, to acknowledge her worth, and to say thanks to her family and community for lending her to the party to be of service. We continue to make our preparations. We have been doing our audits to ensure that our organization within the divisions is fine-tuned. We have been doing our polling, and at this time, the People's National Party is polling ahead in 12 of the 14 municipal corporations. I've heard the assertions from the Prime Minister and the Jamaica Labour Party saying otherwise, but announced an election. A party that is confident of winning the election doesn't continue to postpone it serially. And we are asking the government to ensure that they do not trample on the democratic process that we fought hard for as a country, and for them to announce the local government election. We have heard through sources that there's a plan to postpone the election until after the budget debate, with a view to continue this tour of making wild promises to the people of Jamaica. I can very well recall in the lead up to the 2020 election that they spent millions of dollars to have a groundbreaking for the Charisma project in Landover in St. Anne. And up to this day, we have had no work taking place in Landover to build those hotel rooms. This seems to be another in that series of just making and we do know that the misery index is high in the country. There are a lot of complaints. We are confident that the people of Jamaica are calling for a change, and we are confident that that change begins with the local government, which when they call it, we will win it. Thank you.
Members of the public might become aware of a statement made just yesterday by the Prime Minister coming out of their party meeting, that they are not about making gimmicks in respect of the designation of Portmore into a parish and to gerrymander the boundaries in Portmore, in St. Catherine, for their benefit. The statement that it is not a gimmick is a gimmick in and of itself. And the reason being, the Prime Minister is yet to disassociate himself and reject the statements made by his cabinet colleague, Minister Warmington, that they are pursuing the establishment of parish boundaries unilaterally and in a way to give advantage to the Jamaica Labour Party. The People's National Party attach much significance to that pronouncement, not only because of Portmore, because if the government should proceed to use the parish county boundary to redraw parish boundaries, they can do that right across the country, which, as we have said before, is a classical definition of gerrymandering. That step by the Holness administration would be a retrograde step. It will seek to undo what we have done as a country since 1979, 1980, going 44 years that we have had an electoral system in place, participated in by both sides and by independent commissioners to ensure that the elections in Jamaica at both the local government level and the national parliamentary level can be unquestionable by any side that is not victorious. It is a sacrifice that we have made as a country, as a people, to bring the system to where it is now. We cannot and we ought not to allow the despotism of the oldest administration to undo that which we have achieved over the years.
Thank you. The Prime Minister has been fundamentally dishonest in his statements, in his recent statements about crime being reduced. The incontrovertible fact is that over the last 8 years, murders have increased by an average of 300 per year since the JLP took office. If they had just maintained the average under the previous PNP administration, an additional 2,000 odd Jamaicans would be alive today. They campaigned on people being able to sleep with their windows and doors open. It was, in hindsight, a cruel falsehood, a cruel fraud perpetrated on the people of Jamaica. The latest attempt to deceive the people of Jamaica is by somehow equating accusatory crimes like break-ins and robberies with murders by aggregating the statistics. Now, what terrifies Jamaican people are serious violent crimes, murders, shootings, rapes. People are much less concerned, even though they are concerned, but much less concerned about something like a break-in. But if we focus even on break-ins, and we've had a reduction of 100 and odd year over year. And if you think of what is typically lost in a break-in, a phone, a laptop, maybe a small appliance, the value might be $100,000. So when you have a reduction by 100, no, 10, 20, 50 million, let's say 100 million saved. But what the GSF statistics do not cover is the break-ins to people's bank accounts, which figures are much greater. If the accusatory crimes tracked by the constabulary force included fraud, bonds, last year alone, that was $1 billion Jamaican dollars. This is in banks and the loss borne by either the account holders or the shareholders of the banks. If we were then to include scamming, which is also not tracked by the GSF in there, is of another $1 billion US dollars, not Jamaican dollars. So, you know, there's a saying that there you have lies, damn lies, and statistics. The Prime Minister has misled the people with his revisionism about the economy. He's now trying to do it by aggregating statistics that combine apples with oranges to attempt to show that people are safer. The polls reflect that people feel much less safe now than they did 10 years ago. And that is the reality of what is happening with violent crime in the streets of Jamaica, in the communities of Jamaica. And we did much better with a tiny fraction of the resources that are available today as a result of the economic reforms that we instituted. And when we come back to office, we will again show what can be done with these increased resources in terms of making people feel safer, more secure, and as a result, businesses, large or small, will see productivity increase from their workforce.
Thank you very much. You've heard from the spokespersons who are here, and we will now open the floor to any questions that any of the journalists may wish to pose.
Afternoon. Why was the opposition not more forceful in pushing for by-elections in the more than a dozen divisions that were vacant, whether because of death, resignation, or persons being expelled from the municipal councils?
The issue of by-elections at the local government feature, which is that if elections are due within a year, no by-election is required to be held. And as you know, we have been expecting by-elections, local government elections have been due. And that has really a question.
Minister's response to the Portmore boundary issue, court on it, and do you feel
the source of political unrest? Jamaica was disingenuous in trying to maintain that their approach to Portmore is not driven by political considerations. It's very obvious, and it's obvious to everyone. In fact, the main objective, because this whole committee admitted that if whether Portmore is a parish or not has no real bearing on the level of service that they provide. The truth to them, which is that's what's driving this. In terms of how they proceed, you know, we are prepared to protect the interests of the people of Portmore. In terms of their status, their right to, which was a right that they wanted, and in law, they're the only party which has that right, and we don't feel it's appropriate. They say, and so that is one major issue for us. And in terms of setting this, boundaries must be set in a way that the EOJ, based on proper quantitative data and not gerrymandering to create a political advantage to either party, that is what should drive it. And that's a principle that we intend to stand on. In terms of our specific, how we address, we will see how just our tactics. The principle which is guiding us is that because democracy is very important. The steps and the progress that has been made is critical, and we can't go back to where we were coming from. We must move forward, building on what we've achieved.
Next question is to the General Secretary. Last evening, the Jamaica Labour Party would have said that they're ready. They're going to take it, pointing to the track record and insisting that the country will give them the nod to that.
My response to that is, if they were so confident, why have they postponed the election since 2020? The postponement of the elections that were due in 2020 That has been done every single year by this JLP administration that is claiming to be confident. People that they refer to, nobody has ever seen. We know nothing of them. The 4 polls that we saw in the country last year, we saw one in February that the PNP had a very small lead. We saw one in July that the PNP had a 5-point lead. We saw another one in September with a 3.4% lead, and another one in December with the PNP having a 3 points lead. The last two being commissioned by the business that are independent after of the PNP, and that one in December. It was conducted between November 24 and December 7 with the 26 to all of their momentum. Even with that, they were still high. Even after they choreographed that it was the biggest conference, which was also a lie, because it was not the biggest conference for them. We're not including ourselves in that. It was not their biggest conference. And I don't see any evidence to support them being confident based on what we've been checking. And we are not just relying on polls only. We also check the organization with the different divisions and constituencies. And we are confident that the local government election we will come up with. Because the people of the country who we've been consulted and relying on, they have expressed their views, and I think those views are very clear. The issue of crime, despite what they want, the reality is that people are more concerned about this now. Even if you look at employment, in every single poll that is done in the country, the unemployment still comes up. It's clearly a disconnect between the statistics and the reality on the ground for the people. And the focus on highways, everybody is still complaining about the road that leads to their house in their community. The garbage pile up, we see garbage collection that has waste and all sorts of things growing on it, so you can tell how long it has been there. This government has failed miserably, and you cannot continue to use PR only to govern, because PR cannot convince a hungry man that he is not hungry when the food prices are increasing.
What is the party's position on campaign financing, specifically for this local government election, in terms of making its full list of donors public, not just during the designated period?
Well, the campaign finance laws were overhauled when the PNP was last in government based on the recommendations that were brought by the Electoral Commission of Jamaica. And we intend to comply with those laws. And that is what will be the guiding light for us, compliance with the laws of the land.
Mr. Bunting, you pointed to the government again using PR and the statistics being dishonest. What will the next PNP government do immediately to tackle this issue of crime and the financial crimes that you just spoke of earlier?
Okay, well, let me separate the violent crime from the financial crime, because those have different approaches. Although there is a nexus between scamming in particular, fuel for violence areas where it is predominant. But just look at the existing sources. There has never been any time in the history of Jamaica when the Ministry of National Security has had the size budget that it has had over the last few years. So there is no constraint of fiscal space. There is no constraint in terms of human resources. The Army has more than doubled in size. The GSCF has added thousands of personnel. So why with all of this are we not seeing better results? Well, one reason is that the deployment of these resources is very inefficient. It's not data-driven. So when we start with the emphasis on the Army, because this government was determined to pursue the failed states of emergency as their primary tool of policing. First few weeks, this year undermanned. What we've seen is that soldiers cannot replace police officers. They don't have the training, they don't have the breadth of training, and they don't have the powers under the Jamaica Constabulary Force Act, under normal legislation. They really have to operate in support of policing. So that was a misguided allocation of resources. And what is even more disappointing is that a lot of that allocation to the GSCF went to capital equipment to the JDF, went to capital equipment for the Coast Guard, for other surveillance equipment, etc. And yet we see repeatedly illicit flights into Jamaica being discovered after the fact when they should have been tracked from their enter our EEZ. And instead, they land, months after, weeks after, years after, in some cases, we have no idea who was aboard, who was the pilots, what was the cargo, what happened to the cargo. We haven't even traced the source, the origin of these flights. Now that shows a failure of all this capital that was expended to strengthen the Coast Guard, strengthen the maritime and aerial surveillance systems. So that was a misallocation of resources. More recently, we've seen approximately 2,000 additional GSF personnel recruited. But what has happened there? They've gone into these centralized units like PSTEB, the Public Safety and Traffic Enforcement Branch. PSTEB was launched 5 years ago. Prior to PSTEB's launch, the road fatalities varied between 250 and 400 at a high. Subsequent to PSTEB's launch, 400 is the minimum it has been. It's now between 400 and 500 every year. It shows that PSTEB has been a failure. It's a misallocation of resources, similar with the specialized ops division, which replaced the old mobile reserve. So we get a lot of big announcements, but in terms of what is happening on the ground, just last night we were in Westmoreland. From October last year, business persons, community leaders were saying robberies, violent crime, shootings are picking up in Westmoreland Police Division. Yet on November 30th, when 270 new graduates came out of the police academy, not a single one was assigned to the Westmoreland Division. And then in December now, in a knee-jerk reaction, they declare a state of emergency to attempt to show that they're doing something, when a more data-driven approach, a more strategic approach, a more planned approach would have been to allocate more personnel to the divisional commander, under the control of the divisional commander. We'd have seen a more effective crime prevention activities during that time. So that's that. In terms of the cyber side, now that requires a whole real partnership between the parts of government that deal with cybersecurity and technical security, and strengthening the capabilities of the GSCF in both investigation, both detection, investigation, and successful prosecutions. We know that a significant amount of violent crime is fueled by what is taking place in scamming. We saw again in Westmoreland, I believe it was just a few weeks ago, a videotape of a brother and sister being buried and videotaped in a shadow, buried in a shallow grave, and videotaped, which in a sense illustrates the impunity with which these criminals feel they can operate under this GLP administration. They were sending a powerful signal to others not to cross them in terms of the proceeds of scamming. And so that fuels what fraud and other types of scamming and cyber issues or scamming or fraud issues using
from the Green Shield division has gone independent.
I didn't hear the first part of your question because the Zoom was.
I'm asking if you could respond to reports we're seeing that Councillor Lawton Mackenzie from the Green Shield division, who was not apparently named as the candidate last night, is now independent.
Well, our approach to selecting candidates is based on their viability in a constituency. Councillor Lawton Mackenzie, affectionately known as Jimmy, is a comrade that has offered tremendous service to the Green Shield division for, I think, about 20 years. And we commend him for his service and his stewardship over the period of time. Certainly, he would have achieved some things, and there are other things that he would have wanted to achieve that he wasn't able to, just based on how the system is set. In assessing the Green Shield division, we would have done our assessment, would have done our polling in there, and we were in the field up until Saturday, double-checking some information from the Green Shield division. And when we made the assessment, Warren Littleton is in a comfortable position to bring home the Green Shield division for the People's National Party. And as such, based on what we had discussed before as to how we'd approach the settlement of the division with Littleton and Councillor Mackenzie, we made a decision to present Warren Littleton. I'm sure that there is some disappointment that Councillor Mackenzie must be feeling, because you do get disappointment when you have unmet expectations. And I know he wanted to run, but I still want to go on the record to say that we thank him for his contribution. I'm encouraging him and his supporters to support the party that they've been loyal to for years, and they've made a sterling contribution too. If he decides to go independent, then I can't say that I wish him success in his endeavors, but I certainly hope that he will be able to find his way back home to the fold of the People's National Party, where we await him with open arms. Thanks.
All right, Mr. Robinson, a pain point for many Jamaicans, ATMs not working.
Yes.
Do you believe the government is doing enough to address this issue?
The government has done absolutely nothing. I believe the Bank of Jamaica, as a regulatory agency with responsibility for the financial sector, needs to intervene. There are some minimum service level standards that must obtain. Right now, the banks are pushing customers out of the branches. They are more than encouraging customers to go to ATMs, because there are some banks that you can't do any cash transaction within certain branches. So you're being forced out of the branches to alternative means, whether it be online banking. In reality, not everybody can do online banking. There are older persons who are not comfortable. So persons have to use the ATMs. They have to use it for depositing money, and they have to use it for withdrawals. And we have a situation now where many of the ATMs don't work. If you go on a Friday evening, the longest line you're going to see anywhere is at an ATM. And the problem we have is that the banks, in my view, have not made enough of an effort to ensure that the ATMs are functional. There are issues, and where the government needs to intervene, the issue of crime and violence has affected the banks, because you have had vandalism, you have had people who have stolen entire ATM machines out of the kiosks, etc. But even notwithstanding that, people must expect that if you go to an ATM, you should get cash to do your normal business. You should do a deposit. Right now, they are failing the Jamaican people. The government has said zero. The Minister of Finance, nothing. The BOJ, nothing. 2 weeks ago in Barbados, some banks decided that they wanted to impose some fees. And not even 24 hours passed before the central bank intervened and said nothing can go so. The government must do better to protect the interests of the banking sector. My colleague Fitz has been on a campaign for years. He has a bill before Parliament that we hope they will allow debate on. But right now, you see mega profits being declared in terms of the financial institutions and the small person, well, everybody feeling the pinch in terms of being able to operate. We would do better. We don't believe you must regulate everything, you know. We don't. But in cases like this, where there's a failure of market forces, then we will intervene as a future government. And there is a pressing public need. This is an essential service. It is an essential service. People have to use cash for certain transactions. And it can't be allowed that banks can just continue to operate this way where people cannot access ATMs. It's unacceptable, and a future PNP government would act differently.
All right, well, that's a wrap. Thank you very much, members of the media, for participating in what has been, I think, a helpful and informative press conference. And we thank you for your time and look forward to future engagement as we move forward. Thank you very much.